and welcome to After the Elephant. I'm Mark Allen, and this is a special edition of Late Night Health and our response and discussion panel to session 4 of Identifying the Elephant in the Room: Critical Communication Strategies in the Face of Sexism. We've just heard from leaders in the natural products industry that work in legal, finance, marketing, and retail on what they're seeing and hearing in the industry on the topic of sexism. The goal of our After the Elephant session is to process this information and respond to it in a discussion format with some thought leaders in the industry, and then challenge other leaders in the industry to do some deep work to make meaningful and fundamental changes. Let me introduce our panel members right now. We're going to start with Alan Lewis, VP of Advocacy Governmental Affairs from Natural Grocers. And I'm going to change your size right there and it'll work. Okay. Over here we have Ryan Honeyman, partner and owner of Lift Economy. And welcome, Ryan. And we also have Denise Lambertson, founder and chairwoman of LMS. Thank you all for being here. Let's start real simple. We've all been watching this last panel. What's your takeaway? Alan, let's start with you.
Well, this series is getting really interesting, and we're talking about some really difficult issues about past trauma and the emotions that we've all tamped down for our whole lives, and then popping up, and then realizing when we're interacting with anybody else that pain is present, right? And there's a part of being respectful is recognizing that that pain and the trauma is present. And I'm not focusing just on women. I'm focusing on men and women, and that collectively, it sounds like we're getting to the place where we're going to take care of everyone within the boundaries that we set.
Ryan, what's your takeaway?
Yeah, I appreciate Alan your comments. What stood out for me was just some feelings of grief around just how like systemic and how deep this is, and just sometimes I feel like in our society we don't actually allow for grief. It's more like move past that emotion, focus on action steps to address it, and so yeah, I'm trying to sit with that feeling and use it, I think, to motivate what I've seen as part of my work, which is calling in more men, particularly white men, to like, this is actually beneficial. Like addressing sexism, addressing racism is actually beneficial for us too. It actually creates a more joyful and loving experience for all of us. It's not just for women or for people of color. And so I think that it really has been sitting with me, is that combination of grief and the desire to like bring more men into a space of belonging, that we can sort of understand how this affects us as well.
And Denise, your comments. What was your thought? What are your thoughts regarding the panel?
Yeah, my biggest takeaway is that this issue is so nuanced. There's like the range of from sexual predator to uh, microaggressions for somebody who would want to do better and does not know that they are, kind of creating a sexist environment, etc. That is really, really broad. And I think that, my feeling was that my insight was maybe thinking less about like the tranches of legal, marketing, retail, and more about, hey, what are the issues we're going to do to solve for, and how can we help the men and women, frankly, that want to just be better and have made mistakes and have habitualized, bad behavior because of the way that different generational experiences, and then how are we going to treat management of companies that's allowing, and then how are we going to treat like true sexual predators, that engage in behavior that is, that is deeply uncomfortable. That would be, in my opinion, a conversation about a cancel culture, etc. There's just a spectrum, uh, and I think it's yeah. So that was my biggest takeaway.
I think, from my point of view, I thought the overwhelming theme of the panel was respect, both toward women. Mostly, we need to respect women more, but it also goes back and forth. I mean, both to men and to women. Ryan, what are your thoughts about respect?
Yeah, I mean, it's a baseline necessity, right? And so, what I heard was a lot of the women expressing the disrespect and like the sense of not belonging in many of these spaces, and then also this like incredible resiliency and like desire to write their own narratives and stand up in face of that. So I think respect is great, and like for me that's the baseline. Like we should go into not just respect but like creating belonging, and so that's sort of what I'm hoping to see happen in this industry.
Denise?
Yeah, I love that, Ryan. Creating belonging, because I do think respect was absolutely a theme, and how do you execute that? How do you implement that? How do you create as organizations, as an industry, as a community, like, what if the theme was certainly that the respect needs to be there, but how can we get there? How can we set benchmarks of what respectful behavior is? Some of us might feel like it's really obvious. Others might need some support and help to understand what the rest of us consider to be respectful. So I'm excited for kind of that second part of the conversation, which is like the how we're going to get there.
Alan?
Well, I've got something to say about that. I think the reason that there's a lack of respect when we focus on men uh, engaging with women in our industry, I think the focus or the reason there's a lack of respect is that men and boys are raised where they cannot be vulnerable. And if you can't be vulnerable, you can't acknowledge that the person in front of you, a woman in front of you, is going to be better at a whole lot of things that you're not so good at, right? And I see Denise
Yeah.
saying, "Oh yeah." So many of the women in this series are colleagues and partners of mine that I talk to at least once a week, sometimes every day. Why? Because they're better than me. But you've got to go back to the cruelty that boys and young men suffer at the hands of other boys, men, and as we talked about, girls as well. And that we can't have that conversation, right, Ryan, about our vulnerability and about our pain. Now, I'm not shifting this conversation to making it about that, but it's the other side of this. The men that I know that are disrespectful do so because they think that if they're vulnerable, they will suffer at the hands of other people, particularly other men. And so that is, in my humble opinion, the part of the generational healing and changing culture that we need to undertake.
One of the panel members made a comment that boys will be boys. I think it's Suzanne Sheldon said that, and that it's not 1950. I don't think any of us were around, even me, in 1950. But is that same boys will be boys, the boys club, is that still status quo? Or are we letting, and that's not the right way of phrasing this, but are we letting women in? That's
Well, can I take a shot at responding?
absolutely, Alan.
I think that's the wrong framing, Mark. Um, boys, I love the concept of boys being a problematic statement. I have raised my own two sons and dozens of other young men who are now end of 20s, early 30s. They are deeply traumatized by their childhoods. Now, if you're tending to say that means that they can act out on that, especially against women that they work with or that they're dating, well, that's a hard stop for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Um, so boys will be boys as long as they can't talk and have a forum that they're safe among a group of men, a family, church, or wherever, where they can express that. And often, as we've heard on this call, you don't know it's there. I was at 5 hours of testimony on a sexual harassment bill last night in the Colorado legislature. Multiple women, professionals, lawyers who deal with this stuff every day, perfectly dressed and coiffed, broke down on the stand in a 3-minute testimony because it is so visceral. So that's latent throughout all of this conversation.
Ryan, how about
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, I really like that, Alan. The thing that stands out to me about, maybe a lot of these, and it's a point I keep coming back to. I think a lot of these conversations, it felt sad to me that some of the conversation in the panel was about how can women like sort of maneuver within this system of like male dominance and oppression in order to like maximize their best chances, when for me it's like how can we as men like actually dismantle this system of oppression so that women are not like maneuvering and like figuring out how to pitch better in a system that's dominated by patriarchy. And so I really think that there's still this like point that I keep coming back to where there's a fundamental shift where men realizing that this is actually better for us too. It's not just better for
Yeah.
women. Like there is more joy, there is more happiness, there is more love, there's more compassion. Like until we realize that we are going to actually benefit and it's actually amazing. Like not many men are happy in this system. Like they might have power, but they are unhappy. And so as the more that we can communicate that this is beneficial to men for us, it's not just a favor, then I think that's where we're going to see a cultural shift.
And Denise, I'm going to change the question just a bit. Will girls be girls? And that's a put down. I don't know if it's women will be women.
Yeah, I don't even know what that like colloquialism like means when you should put it in that context. And I apologize. I think someone's mowing their lawn. So when I'm done with this question, I'm gonna put my earbuds in. But the the concept of the concept of gender is changing in front of our eyes, which is another just fascinating part of evolution and life that we're all very lucky to be here to witness. And I would say that there, I think you're right, Alan, that boys will be boys is just not acceptable in that kind of real traditional way that we know it. But I do feel that the concept of a boys club, I hear it a lot from women who are raising capital. Like they are not they don't get the opportunity to meet as many investors because they don't hang in those circles. There's the idea of like I'm not on the golf course with the guys, and that's not I think men, boys being boys exclusionary on purpose, but that is a kind of a community that has developed where business happens, right? So I believe that we have to also try and kind of dismantle that in between as well, and make sure that we're inviting. And in the beginning, I believe it will, for a while, it will have to be a very conscious, um, you know, frontal lobe decision. Like we're not going to have these conversations unless there's representation in this group, even though it's just over a dinner where we're supposed to be social and we pass ideas and deals back and forth. We have to have perspective from a diverse group, and we have to make sure that we're offering these opportunities to a diverse group of people, women, etc. So there's there's more layers, I think, than I think boys will be boys. Gosh, I hope that's over. But the next concentric circle is, where is business happening that women aren't as frequenting as much, and how do we invite them in and make them more comfortable, etc. Make us more comfortable.
This is After the Elephant here on Late Night Health. And we do have comments coming up, but our panel members are just rocking it. So I haven't gone to some of our comments. And if you want to comment, you can comment right on the comment page. Two comments. One, Suzanne Shelton said in reaction to Alan that the truth is a lack of vulnerability is a vulnerability, and I agree with that. And let's see, we had Servet Hassan who's watching. She'd like to hear comments on what the panel discussed about ageism and sexism in the natural products industry. Alan, I'll start with you again.
Oh, geez, man, you're picking on me. Um, yes, Denise, to everything you said, by the way. It's a little bit out of scope for this panel, but I hope that the series moves into these questions about why there are boys clubs and why they exclude them. And I think you've heard my point of view on that. I'm not in very many boys clubs. So you see this stuff, predatory men, and I'm going to stick with predatory men. Obviously, these things happen across the board. You see predatory men behaving in ways that there's any objective person would say, no, step back from her, don't touch her, don't say those things. She doesn't want you near her. She is communicating that in 1,000 different ways. What the hell are you doing? That could be at the Hilton lobby during Expo West. It can be in a cubicles and offices, and as well, it can be in a boardroom where things are being said and done, and behaviors being expressed that everyone is uncomfortable with, but the perpetrator, and I'm using that word on purpose, mm-hmm. doesn't get it or thinks in some unconscious place that that's how they should behave. That is so broken at the personal level and the cultural level, right?
Oh, it is. I agree.
So and the microaggression needs to be followed up with a micro pushback. No, right? We've heard that a lot.
And no means no.
And that needs to be from everyone in the room or the lobby or the cubicle farm or the break room, right?
Right. By the way, we talked about boys clubs on our very first session, which was on March 16th, and you can go back and watch that if you want to get more insight onto boys clubs. Let's talk about dollars. I was fascinated, and I've got some notes here, that women raising money have a more difficult time than men. And there were a number of reasons for that. What doesn't quite jive to me is that women across the country generally are running the finances of a family. And in terms of natural products, they determine which supplements and what other natural products are purchased for the family. Yet if they go out and become an entrepreneur and they need funding, they're not as successful as men. Ryan, thoughts?
I'm going to toss it over to Denise to this is, I feel like her wheelhouse. You want to jump in?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you, Ryan. It's so interesting. And I got a lot out of what David was sharing about, women are, when they're fundraising, they are uncomfortable when it gets to the part about asking for money, or they giggle. And like that, I found that not surprising, but just such a thoughtful insight that I'm going to pay more attention to. But, one of the things that I have heard from female founders who are fundraising, and I by the way, really appreciated what Claudia said and about seeing more and more women building businesses coming through her firm, and I feel the same. That I see that so much more. One of the things that I have heard from female founders in my community is it's often other women that are like particularly hard on them, and it's there's this idea that there will be this kind of camaraderie, but it kind of reminds me of the there's only room for so many women at this table with capital, so this spot is taken, is the feeling that women entrepreneurs share with me. And I've you know I actually think that there is a flip side to that, which is women have, when they aren't in an environment where they own their own businesses, there's much more pressure and expectation for delivery put on women in a work environment, on a parity scale, and that's been proven. And so, therefore, they are, I think women, we are harder on. We expect more from ourselves, and we expect more from the other people that we work with. And so, I think that women don't fund other female businesses as much because they don't fund. They're particularly discerning about funding all businesses, and there just are less women entrepreneurs. So that was one thing that I was thinking about when David was speaking. But in general, on women raising money, I mean, it's incredible. Even in the portfolio that we have at Constellation Capital, the women have so much harder of a time. There's this feeling that that the men that are raising money kind of wake up, roll out of bed, and do a pitch, and all of a sudden the money starts pouring in, and women have to work so much harder to prove that they are even worthy of building a business. And
Excuse me, Denise. Why do
yeah,
you think they have to prove themselves more? If they have, if they have a product, and whatever that product might be, and they want to sell it, and they need money. I'm just used to holding products up on
yeah.
camera. So why is it?
I do
What's
think
the
it's a
setback?
systemic, habitual, a situation where men feel more comfortable, that more men have capital to invest than women have capital to invest, and men feel more comfortable in investing in men's businesses, and expect more from women entrepreneurs. That's my that's my kind of biggest takeaway. And I think there are concerns about, sadly, but there are concerns about women having to split their time between their role in their home, and as typically a caretaker, primary caretaker for their children, if that's the stage that they're at in life, or if that's the choice they made on family. And so I believe it's those things combined. But I think it would be great to hear from Ryan and Alan on this point too, because I'm kind of on the inside of it, and I would love, and have really strong feelings and emotions, and people who are confiding me about a lot of their fear. And I would love to understand what it feels like for you both on the outside, why you think that, or if you even think that men are harder on women entrepreneurs for funding.
Are
Yeah,
women are women hard on women entrepreneurs?
That's what I hear.
Yeah,
Female investors are hard on female entrepreneurs, and men don't invest in as many female led companies either. So it's kind of like a double whammy.
got it.
yeah.
Alan, any thoughts?
No, I'm going to let Ryan jump in.
Well, I'll just pass the ball. Thanks, Alan. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I'll try to keep it brief. So in 2016, our company, we raised a small fund, $1 million fund to invest in women and person of color owned businesses. With the reason we did that fund was because of the challenges we had seen with women and folks of color in raising capital. So there's a couple reasons. There's a couple ways that I think this could be improved for like fundraising. And one is just knowing the numbers around, like, I think it's like, of all the venture capital, like, women are it's like a small percentage, and then Black women are actually less than 1%. So there's intersectional issues as well. So So that's one piece. Another piece is the expectations of returns, and this sort of like looking for unicorns. You know, a lot of investors look for this model of like a white male from Stanford who, you know, dropped out sophomore year and wears a hooded sweatshirt. You know, it's like they're looking for Mark Zuckerberg. And so I think it's important to know that there's other forms of capital that people can access. So, like venture capital and angel capital from high net worth people is less than 5%, some say like 3% of all total people who could invest in a company. So a lot of folks are looking more towards direct public offerings or, you know, investment crowdfunding through sites like WeFunder and Crowdfund Main Street. And so I would say for some women, like don't even go necessarily to those men who are going to be so judgmental. It's like there's other forms of capital out there. And then I think it's important for men as well to understand some of the ways that the way the capital is structured in terms of like if it's a loan, do you need to have an asset to secure the loan? You know, a lot of sort of more progressive ways of investment capital are like you don't actually need to back it with your house. It's an unsecured loan because of the, you know, historical oppression of women and folks of color. You don't necessarily They don't necessarily have the assets to back, you know, getting loans. And so I think there's lots of ways to go into it, but also happy to cede my time to see if Alan has any other thoughts.
Let's talk about boundaries because that was mentioned in the panel as well. Uh, Men and women meet at a convention. Um, they maybe they go out to dinner as a group. Maybe it could even be one on one. After a few drinks, most people are a little relaxed. Do those boundaries change at that point, Denise?
Yeah, this was the part of the discourse that I was conflicted by, to be honest, because, and I think Ryan touched on this. Maybe it was Ryan at the beginning. Sorry, it may have been Alan. But that is it. It's not just a woman's responsibility to be strong and set boundaries. It's also men's responsibility to not display the behavior that would need boundary set against, right? And I also think this kind of brings in the question as it relates to ageism as well. Uh, um, I believe that women and most people, as they age, they gain in confidence as they've had more life experience, and so therefore they feel maybe more empowered to set boundaries than they did when they were younger and starting off their careers. And I mean, speaking for myself, that is certainly the case. I believe that it's my responsibility for the younger women that work for me, for the younger people that work for me, to not just show that I stand up for myself, but also that not put it on them, right, and not put them in situations where they will have to test that muscle, maybe before they are ready to. And I think coupled with that is the generational difference in kind of anxiety and depression, that we're seeing in people in their 20s and 30s. And I want to be really respectful of that's like a different journey and path than maybe some of the, like, where I am now. I didn't have those same, or my generation didn't have the same challenges, in your 20s living through COVID. So I think I think the boundaries piece is important. Everyone in life needs to learn boundaries. I don't believe that it's women's responsibility to set boundaries at trade shows. It's, it is the responsibility of the trade show, the community, the men, and all the way, all of the concentric circles out, and um, to make it stop.
All right, let's get to the nitty gritty of what After the Elephant is really all about, and that's solutions. And I'll start with you, Alan. Setting boundaries, um, uh, uh, having more women entrepreneurs get more access to funding. What are some of the solutions that we in the industry can do?
Mark, I'm going to try to swing for the fences here and connect the last two questions and this one. I've been on the pitching side of the table, and I've been pitched to a lot. And when I was pitching big multi-million-dollar deals to global corporations, um, all men in the room, uh, you're allowed to express business risk, but again, you can't express doubt. And the people on the other side of the table don't want to hear that you have doubt. This is a tacit agreement among the participants. Now, two things happen. If a woman is in that situation and unable to behave like that jerk that I got really good of impersonating, um, men aren't going to believe her, right? And if she wants to be a real full rounded business person and talk about all of the challenges, she's not going to be, she's not part of the tacit secret handshake agreement. All of that's a broken system, right? But I'm going to jump over to the boundary issue. That same bravado is what shows up in the Dan Hilton of lobby, right? This idea that there is no consequence to expressing a desire, an outcome, or whatever who's ever around, and that's how I, as a man, am supposed to behave. And and it's just so crazy. But I'm going to link those two and ask people to think about how those are very much the same thought process, ethic, and behavior that are broken. Now, you asked a question that I forgot, but I hope you don't mind my tying some things together.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, what was your question?
I don't remember.
I remember, and actually you answered it, I think,
Yeah.
Alan, which is like, what do we do now? You know, like what are the actionable steps, I think was what it was. And I believe that you tied that together really nicely, because there are steps, you know, in that. It's not, you know, at least from what I heard.
So what you can do now is if you are getting a pitch for a venture company, whether if someone is making a pitch to you for money, whether it's a man or a woman, you have all these ingrained habits and perceptions. You make a list. We share a list among the industry of questions to ask yourself while you're listening, ways to evaluate what you're hearing. And you ask yourself, am I responding positively to this unrealistic bravado and confidence? Or am I responding to a woman's or somebody's full-fledged human holistic urge, desire to build this company for these reasons based on this foundation? I'd love to see, Ryan. I think you're perfectly positioned to do that, and maybe you have to build that practice in and challenge venture funds or lenders or whomever else, M&A people, to use a different rubric and not respond to some ancient childhood emotional response.
Ryan?
Yeah, and I can sort of touch on like this broad, like what should we do? I think there's a few things. One is, I think, I've sort of mentioned it, but like men, I feel like this burden should not be on women. This should be, men should take this up as like, this is our work. And so I would say that, what are the spaces, like I'm interested in helping create the spaces where men can like support each other and not just talk about like the football game, beer, and sports cars. Like that's not relating to each other on like a deep level. That's just,
I have personally never talked about either one of any of those three. Not a one.
You may be unique, Mark. You're
Yeah,
a unique
well,
guy. But like, what are those spaces that we can talk about vulnerability, like Alan mentioned earlier, that we can talk about like how it's really hard to have this pressure to provide for the family, and like what does that do to our emotional relationships, and how do we deal with stress? What is our mental health for men? So I think that's really critical. I think also just inviting using our position and sort of privilege to like invite others to the conversation. So it's like if I'm going to give a panel discussion, it's like how am I inviting women or folks of color like onto that panel or in replacing myself with folks. So it's like using my privilege and positionality to like invite others to the conversation that might be traditionally avoided. And so I think there's like both a space for men to like process, and also like there's these sort of actions that can have a big collective impact of like let's invite folks in to these conversations that might not otherwise be included.
How do we help improve a woman's financial stability in the industry? Uh, Equal pay for equal work, uh, uh, maybe child, caretakers, so that a woman can work because she is primary support for her family. What are some of the options that need to be taken? What steps can we do right now to get that done? Denise?
That's a really big question. I think it begins certainly with being more flexible in what our idea of work is, which I think that the world has already started to do kind of by force with COVID, and then again, I thought David's point was really interesting as well about more women leaving the workforce, so there and that's the foundation of the labor shortage, etc. So we are, and I say the collective we, like, businesses are being forced in order to be competitive. You have to have labor. In order to have labor, you're going to have to start to create alternative environments that are attractive to all people and all women who have families and where and have different concerns, healthcare, that need to be able to leave, where all of these things, and it. I believe that there's things that government should do, but I don't think we can rely completely on government. So the next step for me would be, compliance related to industry, like mandates of some kind, requirements, and I think that's part of what made Me Too successful. In entertainment, in music, and things like that, is that it was so shocking that it forced new laws, and that's when culture really begins to change, is when there's legal culpability. I think relying on individuals, it's hard. Being in business is hard. Working, trying to think about how to make an environment when you're trying to deal with a recession, all these, like, we got to force that inside to a certain extent, right? So yeah, big question.
And the last couple of minutes here, it's what solutions, what can we say to the C-level people? We need to make change. We need to make it now. Solutions to help women grow. And as Ryan has pointed out, if women are growing, men are going to grow right alongside them. It's a win-win for everyone. Ryan?
I would say men might grow alongside women if they have the right accountability and support systems in place to allow that growth. So I think that that's lacking. And another thing I forgot to mention that touches on your point, Mark, is um, if there's a situation like where someone else is making a rude comment, or is asking the woman if they've taken notes in the meeting, when it's like, why wouldn't you ask anyone else in the meeting if they've taken notes? You can actually like speak up as a man and say, there's, I can take notes, there's no reason, to ask her, or like, it doesn't have to be like shaming the person that said it, but just like, you need to be an ally. We need to be allies as men, saying like, it's not her responsibility to push back always. And so I would say like the part of what we can do is like be more advocates and supportive, so that women and other folks don't have to always be the one pushing back.
Thank you, Ryan. Alan, how about you?
Well, I think we're all familiar now with the idea of the true cost of food, right? Instead of externalizing costs to labor and the environment, and figuring out what it really costs to have that steak or that broccoli. But that same concept needs to apply to the real cost of startups and the real cost of running a business. That goes from healthcare to retirement to flexibility for childcare to maternal leave and paternal leave, and a recommitment to helping especially young families, or as people get a little bit older, there are other different requirements on that end, but a nurturing and supportive environment, which includes training and retraining and sometimes remediation and sometimes a lot of patience. That's the true cost of doing business. And if a venture firm strips all of that out of the capital that's required, or if a new acquirer strips that all out and makes it no longer available, yeah, you can bump up your P&L for a little bit. You can make your balance sheet a little bit better, but the cost is still there, and the cost gets more expensive over time. So I would say that change in consciousness about the true cost of having a healthy, profitable long-term business, honestly, I don't hear that discussed.
And Denise, what can we do now?
Well, I love what both Ryan and Alan said, so let me underline them both their points as a starter. And one other thing to add in is, from financial institutions, more traditional venture, private equity, I would love to see that, when teams are diligencing a deal in a certain category, that there's kind of a mandate that they look at competitive sets of businesses with diverse leadership, as kind of like a triple bidding sort of rule. Like you cannot invest in this out. You have to actually make the case against a group of similar businesses, categories, whatever it is, that has a diverse leadership. And I think just kind of forcing those sorts of behaviors will open up people's eyes to how much opportunity there is with diverse companies with diverse leadership, and therefore open up capital.
Got it. And we're going to wrap up with a comment from Amy Summers, and I'm going to bring that up here. And I think she's right. Men tend to not say anything in these situations. They
That's
just
true.
sit back and watch. And guys, we got to get up and we got to do it. It's better for everyone. And I think that's how we'll end today. Thank you, Ryan, Alan, and Denise. Hold on just a moment or two. And thank you for watching After the Elephant. This has been a special of Late Night Health and our response and discussion to Session 4 of Identifying the Elephant in the Room, Critical Communication Strategies in the Face of Sexism. And Amy Summers has just done a fabulous job in pulling together industry leaders into this very vital topic. It really is. Join us next week, next Thursday, from 1 to 2 o'clock Eastern Time, as we examine the topic of sexism in the supplement, ingredient, and pet sectors of the natural products industry. And make sure you're registered for the Elephant in the Room session so you can listen to what we're responding to during After the Elephant. Go to invincibox.vfairs.com. That's invincibox.vfairs.com to register if you're not registered yet. And if you missed any of the previous sessions, you can watch them all on replay through the end of the series. And of course, we'll see you back here on social media for our post and discussion on After the Elephant for Late Night Health. I'm Mark Allen. Again, thanks everybody. You guys rock. Thank you,
Mark.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll see you next time.